Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, Savage Reads. I have read some interesting books this week, and I have worked more on my knitting project. So I'm about halfway through the current baby onesie, so let me show you that. So I have gotten to about here. So I just need to finish the bottom half. So the next baby onesie after this, I think, is going to be striped, and I'm going to make it in a much smaller size. This is about a 1-year-old size. I think I'll do maybe a 3 to 6 month size and do it in stripes. So that is the crafting update, but let's just jump into the books for today. So I first heard about this book from Jolene at Bookworm Adventure Girl, and I will make sure to link her channel down below. And I read Fireweather, A True Story from a Hotter World by John Violent. This book is mostly following a major fire that happened in 2016 in Fort McMurray in Canada. And it follows the history of that, but also gives us a little bit of the history behind fires and why intense fires like these are likely to become more and more common. And learning about this fire was very interesting. The writing was great, but the author did use the story of the one fire to try to keep you moving throughout the narrative of the book, which is good. I see why the author did it, but was it a little annoying as the reader to say, oh no, what's gonna happen next? And then he goes off on a tangent about what fire means to us as humans. He did kind of have a few moments where he really waxed poetic about the nature of fire and its relationship to humans. Sometimes I found that a little distracting, but I do understand that the main point of this book was to show that climate change is going to cause more problems like this going forward. Overall, this book was very interesting, but I did leave it feeling very depressed. I thought that it had a lot of really great information, but not much that I felt like I could do about it. And so I do recommend this if you want to learn more about fires, if you want to know how climate change is affecting fires. Yes, this book would be for you, especially if, say, you lived in Canada and knew about this specific fire. It might be very interesting. But I do think it might leave you feeling a little depressed and hopeless, which is where I ended up towards the end of this book. Now, in looking for books for my daughters, I decided to pull out Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo, and I had read this book as a kid and remember really liking it. And this was sweet. You have a young girl whose mother had abandoned her when she was very young, and she lives with her father, who's a preacher, and they're new in a town, and she discovers this dog and takes it in. Because of the dog, she makes new friends in the town and learns how to handle things in life that are sweet and happy, but also a little bit sad. This is a really delightful book. It is a little bit surface level and young reader, but I think that works well. I think both of my daughters thought that it was really interesting and were involved with it, and it was a quick read. So I do recommend this one. It is very sweet. Now, the next two books have a bit of a theme, and it is autobiographical fiction. So both of these books are based on the author's life and experiences, but you don't know how much of it is 100% true and how much of it is fictionalized. So the first one that I read was a recommendation from Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and it is Tiananmen Square by Lai Wen. And this is a pseudonym. We don't know much about her as an actual person, but this book is supposed to be actually based on a lot of her real experiences. And it follows her as a child in Beijing in the 1970s and growing up with some of these really difficult things with the Chinese state and this tension that she has growing up, leading into the protests at Tiananmen Square. And this book has that sweeping over many years feel. It does start as she is a child and moves through to her young adulthood. And some of the parts of it that really worked really well for me were her connection with her grandmother and trying to understand her family and where they came from. I think that was really well done. I think that learning about the protests and the effect they had was very interesting, very necessary. This was definitely a heartfelt book. I do find it a little frustrating when you don't know how much of this is a fictional account and how much of this is based on the author's life, but you can tell that she came from a very heartfelt place writing this book. I almost just wanted a little author's note at the end. Didn't need to give identifying information, but just maybe a quick explanation of some of the things that were very much historically true versus what has been fictionalized. But I think overall this was done really well, written really beautifully. A very important subject on which I don't feel like I have read very many books. So I do recommend this one. I thought it was really well done. I just wanted to know more. The last book was a recommendation from the channel Towering TBR, and it was recommended to listen to this on audio, so I listened to Everything Sad is Untrue by Daniel Nayeri. And this book says that it is aimed at young adult, middle grade, but I think I really enjoyed it as an adult. I think the reason it says it's aimed towards those ages is that the author is writing as though he was that age, and he does take a certain delight in telling some poop stories and things that a younger reader might really latch onto. This is a true story of the author's life, and it is told through his stories talking about his family history and then his life as a refugee living in Oklahoma. And I think the way that these stories kind of rambled around and wove together was really lovely. I thought it was really well done. And I wonder if I would have thought differently had I read a physical copy of this book versus listening to it, because I think that the storytelling was really great on audio, because all these stories felt like a friend telling you about their life. Then you start understanding the picture that is being painted of his life, of his family, of the things he has lost and gained through his experiences. The way that these stories are told gives them a lot of mystery and magic, and they end up being really beautiful. I loved this book. I thought it was just really great. Sometimes someone telling their story in the voice of a child can be really grating or annoying, and I thought it was successful in this book. I think the author did a really great job. And as he says in his author's note, which thank you, I love having a little author's note at the end to explain what is accurate, what is fictionalized. He tells you that this book is true as he remembers it. He didn't go through and fact check everything. He didn't go through and make sure that this was a non-fiction factual memoir. This is instead his memories and his stories as he interacted and as he remembered them. And so I think that was a really brilliant way to write this book. Yes, it's fiction, but it's also a true story. And I think that this was a really successful way to do that, fictional autobiography. And that is what I have read the last week or so. I don't know if my thoughts were very clear today, but I'll be back next week with another book wrap up. If you have any thoughts on these books, let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you all on the next one.